This is the last panel of the day. This panel is discussing essentially how to efficiently pay and in fact, in some cases, find cost savings while providing high quality language access. We saved this for last, one, because it's the best panel, that goes without saying, but two, because there isn't an election official around that won't stick around for information on how to save money and provide services. So this was just a way of keeping people in the seats. I'm going to forego formal introductions for both the sake of time and people not having to listen to me. We'll go one by one. I think each person has short remarks. Then we'll engage in some questions and hopefully share some valuable information about finding efficiencies and saving money. So first up is Mr. Craig Latimer. Mr. Latimer is the Supervisor of Elections for Hillsborough County, Florida, which is Tampa, Florida. Prior to his time being the Supervisor of Elections, Mr. Latimer was in law enforcement, and so knows a little something about being legally compliant and following the law. So the floor is yours, Craig. Go for it.
Thank you. Ways that you can certainly save costs. So in Hillsborough County, we've actually been under multi-language for since about 40 years ago. We were in the first group after 1975. Tampa is the city within Hillsborough County, our largest city. Anybody here been to Tampa? Okay. We have a really rich Cuban heritage in Tampa. As a matter of fact, cigar factories were abound in the 20s and 30s. And if anybody here has a desire to step foot on Cuban soil, you can actually come to Tampa and do that. We have a park that has the dirt from 6 regions of Cuba, so you can actually come to Tampa and step on Cuban soil. So we're going to talk about the direct costs, which is translations, and then indirect costs. One of the things, Mr. Chairman, you were talking about it, that if you are a new jurisdiction, a new agency that's come under jurisdiction, there's other places in your state that are already doing this, and you need to reach out to them. We recently had 2 adjacent counties to us come under the 203 and immediately reached out to us. And we're not proud. You know, the one thing about elections officials is that if you're successful, I'm successful, we're all successful. So we're going to open our doors, give everything we can to any other election administrator around our state or around the country for that fact. So yes, life is sharing. There's no doubt about it. And to give a plug to the EAC, somebody beat me to it earlier, but I have a picture, is that you want to be sure and start with their glossary and have consistency across your products. One of the things we found out, and we use professional translators, and the reason for that is if you have staff doing it, make sure that they're translating appropriately and they have good writing skills. If not, you're going to get complaints. We have a melting pot of languages in our community, and so we use a professional translator to do that. What we found out is some of them, once they've translated that word, they don't charge you for it anymore. Tremendous cost saving. So if you're looking for a professional translation service, make sure that you compare apples to apples with them, because they can often be quite different. The second thing that you don't think a lot about sometimes are these. So let me just take you back. 2012, we print in both English and Spanish because we really don't know which ballot the people want. So in 2012, because of unusual amount of referenda items, we had a 3-card, 6-page ballot. We actually didn't have enough room to store the vote-by-mail ballot, or the early vote ballots. We had to enlarge the area where we keep them safeguarded. So it does increase your space. It's going to increase the cost of printing ballots. Tremendous. It's going to double it, basically. You're going to double that cost. We use ballot on demand at our early vote sites, so it's going to increase your ink. It could increase your postage dramatically. So these are things that you need to keep into account. I shared with some people earlier this last year in 2016, my county had a county-wide recount. This last election, we had a 2-card ballot, 4 pages, and so we had to scan 1.2 million ballots to get the 600,000 that we needed just to do the recount. I ended up having to lease an additional high-speed scanner. It took us about 5 days doing 2 shifts a day to get through that process. So again, just a couple of the things that you don't think about. Space, again, language on legal notices is going to require some, and there's some great examples. If you didn't go into this last room back here, go into it, because there's some great examples of how much space it begins to create. But it will affect your printing costs, design costs, everything that you're doing on the ballot and all your other information. We, of course, we're printing Spanish and English on everything. That the rule of thumb is if it affects voting, you're going to put it on there. That's it. Plain and simple. So all your direct mail, notices, ADA compliant ballot marking devices, we use the auto mark, so we have to make sure we've got the audio up to date on that and that everything's ready to go. Our media, or our website, we're pretty fortunate because it automatically goes to whatever language you prefer, including if you go on my website, yes, you can actually have it translated to Klingon if you're a fan. So this is just some of the examples that we have in our office. And the things you need to remember, if you've got a secrecy sleeve on your vote by mail or absentee ballot, down to the oath on your absentee ballot that has to be signed also has to be in English and Spanish. And that's it. Any questions? This is my contact information, and I'll be around. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Awesome suggestions. Got some thoughts to follow up on. Next up is Dr. Gilberto. Now, Gilberto, pronounce it for me.
Zelaya.
Zelaya?
Yeah.
Or Dr. Z, as he's affectionately known here in Montgomery County. I'm proud to say I'm a Montgomery County voter and have had the pleasure of working with Dr. Z and his team on their outreach efforts. And tell me if I'm getting this wrong, but my understanding is you did well over 1,000 outreach efforts last year alone, going out to the community. And they mean it. They will go anywhere with the equipment and information that they have in order to educate voters. I know we work together on coming out to my local church and 3 Spanish-speaking voters that were new to the process. First-time voters came out and participated, and meant the world to them that you were willing to take the time and walk them through the process before they got there. So thank you to you and your team. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, and thank you for your hard work.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Don't fall asleep on me. So I'm Gilberto Zelaya. I'm a Salvadorian first-generation American. So my background is looking at access. I was the informal, maybe formal, interpreter, translator for my parents when they immigrated from El Salvador in the 70s. So I'm very familiar with getting access to information growing up in New York City. And also the difficulties when you're talking to a Puerto Rican nurse or a Colombian nurse when my mom was trying to say something in Salvadorian Spanish and didn't click. So taking that experience and also doing outreach in Africa, Latin America, and Europe, looking at language access. Montgomery County, Maryland got the consent decree in 2002, I think a couple of weeks before the gubernatorial general election, which was like the worst time. They did the best they could. Part of the agreement with the Department of Justice is to hire an outreach coordinator to look at ramping their bilingual staffing, signage, outreach, etc. The budget, it was my salary. We had very little, a shoestring budget. So for those who understand, I'm here kind of preaching to the choir. When you have $1.50 and you got to feed a family of 600,000 registered voters, you do what you can, okay? But because my background in empowerment across basic 3 continents, I'm really big on using our youth, okay? And I created a program called Future Vote in 2004. I want to thank my team that's here today, Jessica, Louise, and we have a new staff member, also she's bilingual, and Michelle. And Margaret Jorgensen, our election director, and Allison McLaughlin, she's our deputy, to allow me the opportunity to create my own canvas to help the county and its voters. Get my clicker. So Future Vote intent is to increase current and future voter knowledge and strengthen ties related to civic participation while emphasizing the importance of preserving participatory democracy, okay? It sounds preachy, but it's very basic and essential to what we all do, whether you're an attorney or a civil rights group, a human interest group, or just the average voter. It's very important that you have the franchise open and ready for the individual wanting to vote. Since 2004, with the advent of Future Vote, I've worked with over 38,000 students. and 21,500 families. If you look at this is one of our training sessions. They're about 900 deep. I invite not only the student who's our future vote ambassador, I expect the whole family to come. Mother, father, grandparents, you have strollers, I do not care. We have these huge training sessions. And at these sessions, we talk to the students about what they can and cannot do on election day, how they will inform the voter, how to greet appropriately, how to dress appropriately, how to greet them. But most importantly, we talk about provisional prevention. It's not the bad P word, okay? Provisional voting is a mechanism to ensure that the voter exercises their constitutional right to secret ballot. However, maybe they didn't register to vote. Maybe they're in the wrong precinct. And so we believe in tough love. You're in the wrong location. However, we will still serve you. Okay, so we talk about provisional prevention, how to leverage the sample ballot. We talk about deadlines. We talk about lines. Okay, and I tell the parents, if you're that important and you can't wait in line, because everything revolves around lines. I am not McDonald's, I'm not Best Buy's, I'm not Walmart. My job is to ensure that I'm here for you to serve you. However, if you do not like standing in line and you break out in hives, you have options. So we talk about early voting, we talk about absentee, we talk about election day. We show them the whole menu of options that you have as a voter before election day. And we give that information to the students, to the parents, to the grandparents, even those individuals who are not old enough to vote. Because in time, when they reach voting age, they understand how to leverage their constitutional right, and they know how to defend it, and also how to help them exercise it. Since 2004 in total, we've given back to the community over almost 79,000 community service hours. So it's thousands of hours, okay? This is a picture at Silver Spring Metro Station. We do a huge flyer leaflet drop. We walk with our individuals going to the Metro about early voting, deadlines, the requirements to become a registered voter, how to vote, when to vote. And we also have a part of social awareness. We've collected over 7,500 coats from Montgomery County, local organizations. Also look at working with not necessarily election-focused, civil rights-focused organizations. Work with pro-immigrant groups. Work with soup kitchens. Work with the PTAs, okay? Why is that important? Because you want to inform the individual who do meet the legal requirements to vote, but also you want to educate the ones that don't, who are not citizens yet. That's the part of prevention, okay? So it's very key. We've also collected over 75,000 pounds of food for our local Manna food bank. So at our training, I ask our students to bring a canned good. If you could bring one, great. If you could bring 100, even better. So we try to help out the community beyond election day. This is a community effort. Parts of our components for Future Vote is early voting outreach, as I noted. We hit all of the Montgomery County Metro stations and bus depots. The students get t-shirts, you know, early voting, vote temprano. They pass out the flyers, bilingual, and we'll get into the bilingual component of the program. Voter education, this is actually Miss Marilyn. She was part of the Future Vote group, so it was kind of neat. You know, she's going around doing her tour, but she helped us register a lot of voters. What's key to this, the students are too young to register voters, but the parents do the voter registration. The parents are the ones that become the registrars, and the students are there to, you know, get business around to the table. It's harder for an adult to say no to a pigtail sixth grader, and that's what's interesting about our program. We have students as young as sixth grade. It's not just high school kids. Most states or jurisdictions really work with seniors and juniors because they think they're mature enough. We're crazy enough to work with sixth graders. These kids are very sophisticated thinkers. Language support. It's extremely important. We have family members, adults who have bilingual skills or are native speakers or have fluency. So we connect the family with the particular event and or staff if we have that bilingual capabilities at our office, okay? With Future, with our students in this past election, we had 68 languages covered and American Sign Language, okay? So we had a huge menu of language beyond Spanish and English. For this the general election, our language competency, out of the 3,600 students, a third of them had a language capacity in another language other than English. So that really opens the opportunity for voters going into a polling place when maybe Punjabi is their native language. Well, we have a student that spoke that language, or American Sign Language. This is beyond Spanish as we're required. And we have precincts where not only do we have one Spanish-speaking judge, we may have up to 4, maybe 1 in German, we have 1 in Hebrew, American Sign Language. It's like a multitude of languages on election day. Office help. They come alphabetized, they sort, they help us store things. Those bags that we all create with all the signage and cabling and pencils and stickers and markers, they help us pack that. The rationale behind that is when this student does every aspect of future vote, from rubber banding pencils to kind of assembling the bag, to help put up a precinct, to help with greeting at the polling place, they are more apt to vote when they become adults because they really understand that all of us, we work more than 2 days every other year. There's a whole lot of things that go behind the scenes that 99% of the voters will not see. But all of our future vote families, they do. They understand that I don't come out of a closet every other year for 2 days. There's a lot, and there's a big mess afterwards. And the kids come to help us out. We have our precinct ambassadors. At any given time, we'll have 2 to 3 students work a 3 to 4 hour shift. So it can range from 10 to 15 students throughout the day. We have about 235 precincts. We have 11 early voting centers. And they really work the crowd. They help us set up the precinct Monday night so the judges could kind of focus on more of the legal kind of aspect, signage, the postage, and the kids move the tables, they put the posters, the signage outside. They really help out set up the precinct. We do a lot in absentee outreach. So we go into the community and we give them, that's one of your options to vote. It's not just on election day, and it helps us reduce the lines on election day or during early voting. Operational support. I mean, you guys probably recognize this image. It's a mess after election day. So the kids rubber band back the surge protectors, they test them, they do an audit count, they tell us which ones work, which don't work, and they really help us because then we could focus on other aspects of election day preparation. But then they understand that these bags don't pack themselves up or act. We don't have little trolls or smurfs waking up in the middle of the night packing these things. And also election night support. When we talked about provisional prevention, a lot of times when you say to a voter, you're gonna have to vote provisionally, a lot of times they may lose it. They get upset. So what we did is we work with individuals that communicate that during the primaries, and I asked them to volunteer with us for the next election. So a lot of these individuals had to vote provisionals, and they know the whole step, that we're not shredding their ballot on election night. We actually count them, we document them, and then we research them and we incorporate them into the canvas. So they understand that, and probably you're at the wrong precinct or you weren't registered to vote. But I'm not here to tell you that it was your fault. We're here to tell you that we're here to help you. And then we educate them about how provisional balloting works. The 2016 summary, we do a lot of out-of-the-box outreach. This one is Jose Gonzalez. What we did is we worked with Black-owned barbershop. We train all of the barbers to do voter registration, and it's a very community feel. So when a client is sitting down getting their tapered or shape up, and they're like, hey, you registered to vote? No, I'm not. Well, guess what? You can register today, and while they're getting their haircut, they register them. And then afterwards, before they pay, they do a demonstration on the equipment. So we did hundreds of voter registration. It worked really well. It worked. It was a great opportunity to meet the community halfway, and we gave them the menu of options that they have before Election Day and on Election Day. Outreach, we work a lot with the special needs community. There's a voter registration application in English and Spanish and Braille that we have that we circulate with our outreach teams. We have all the flyers and information about early voting in Braille as well. These students will go with their parents and they do a lot of the registration. They help the voter register to vote while they could follow the application in Braille in English or Spanish. We did over 17,500 demonstrations on the new ballot marking device and our bilingual ballot. We do a lot of outreach with high school students. Maryland recently lowered the age to serve as an election judge to 16, but for the last election it was 17. So we had about 1,800 students registered to vote. Most of them voted during the motor voter when they get their driver's license, but there's still a lot of students that, not everyone could afford a car or get a driver's license at 17, 18. But we did get over 1,000 election judges that were 17 years of age. That's a big amount of students that really helped us buttress, because you have our older cohort that are getting older, they're not serving as much. Then you have the cohort between 35 and 55. We're busy here today. We have kids, we have careers. So asking one of us, can you serve on election day? Unless I wasn't earning and doing this for a living, I probably wouldn't do it myself. But the reality is these kids are available. Montgomery County does not have school on election day. So there's some conditions that you need to have to make this work. So we don't have school that day. And when the kids find out they could do community service credits or could earn a little bit of cash, they sign up and they follow through the process. So we had over 1,000 students, bilingual and tech savvy, which is interesting. We had a check-in table at one precinct. I do a lot of site visits. And there was 3 elder chief judges, check-in judges, and we had the 2 17-year-olds at the end. And, you know, you have the judge, you know, what's your name? Tom Nguyen. Nguyen, okay. And they're looking at the tablet, Nguyen, N-E-W. He's trying to kind of locate the name, but phonetically. Then you have the other student, oh, Nguyen, boom, 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 boom. Date of birth, boom, boom, boom. I mean, and every 5 seconds, next, next. And the other 3 judges were sweating like, am I doing this really slow? And it became a competition. So I told the kids, guys, you need to slow down because you're getting other judges upset, but at the same time, it makes the line go quicker because they're so tech savvy. We also have 4 Future Vote interns, and we work closely with the nonprofit organizations. So we work with local League of Korean Americans, CCACC, Casa de Maryland. We rotate, we bring a youth in, we're talking about the profession. We have them set up outreach events. We have them go to the high schools. So we really have a one-on-one link. And for the last election, since 2004, we worked with over 250 partners. And that's the reason that we were able to do over 1,100 outreach events in the community, okay? Savings and budget, this is the important part. So when you calculate all of the hours that they donate, we averaged each hour to $13.58. For election night support, when all that stuff comes back to the office, we saved up by $8,100. Okay, so that's a good amount. You could get a couple of things with that money. Now the next one, office assistants, close to 3,000 community service hours at the office. Alphabetizing, putting things to store, packing the bags, signers, posters, that comes out to about a little over $40,000 in cost savings. Now this one, outreach, close to 7,000 hours. You add that up, that's close to $94,000, $93,000 that we've saved. Election day early voting support. Now, that's close to 69,000 hours. And you calculate that, that's close to $925,000 savings since 2004. And if you add it all up, we broke $1 million after this election. So since 2004 to present day, it's over $1 million. I need to adjust that cost because some positions, especially the operations, they make more, but the average was $13.58. That's a little bit higher, but nonetheless, I think if you're able to present this as a $1 million cost savings to your agency, I think it's a benefit not only to the agency and to taxpayers, but also the component of educating these students before they become a voting age. Today, between elections, I must get like 500 absentee requests because students are going to Dartmouth, they're going to MIT, they're going to the military, but because they know how absentee voting works, they vote, they continue to vote. And they come back to the office to work as part of our team and our staff and our training. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Z. And I don't know an election office in the country that wouldn't like to save $1 million in free labor. So appreciate the work and sharing that information with all of us. Next up is a man who's already been introduced, so I guess I'll skip the introduction and just allow you to jump right in. It's Mr. James Tucker from Pro Bono Voting Rights Council for the Native American Rights Fund. So, Mr. Tucker, thank you for being here, and thanks for participating in this panel.
Thank you. And I want to fess up, it's good that he cut it short because it's going to give me more time to go through more slides. I love my slides. But
I'll cut you off. No.
This is my military training, by the way. The reason why I keep seeing the overview, they just told us to tell you what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So there you go. What I'm going to do is just very quickly go through what the legal standards are on costs, some cost studies to basically explain what have previous studies found in terms of what this actually costs, a cost of noncompliance, startup costs, and then some additional tips on ways to reduce. Not going to spend much time on the legal standards. If you want to read the statute, it's all up there. We've got copies back there. What I'm doing is, the reason why I included these is because you will note that the statute and the regulations make clear you got to do it. It doesn't say anything about you got to do it unless it costs a lot of money. And again, it's very broadly applied. I know we covered this more the summit last year, but the standards are very, very broad. Basically, if it's information or materials that you're providing in English, it needs to be provided in the covered language. And again, you see voting materials very broadly defined. And this is the key: good faith is no defense. We've sued places that have raised good faith as a defense, and we love to see it because the case law is crystal clear that it doesn't matter how hard you try, because if the assistance you're providing is ineffective or it's not reaching your target voters, it doesn't matter, you're violating 203. So again, the summary of the VRA's requirements are: it focuses on the ends, not the means. It doesn't matter how hard you try or how much money you spend. If you're unsuccessful, you're not complying with 203. Effectiveness is the polar star. I was talking to some folks about this. Effectiveness, as we know, is a very easy standard to meet because we all know what it means. Not really. The reason why they have a very ambiguous standard like that is because Congress and of course DOJ recognizes that the standard you need to use is going to vary depending on your locality. Even within particular language groups, what you have to do to comply may be different, even among neighboring counties. And it's a bottom-up standard. You look from the voter's perspective, not from the perspective of the election official or administrator. Again, language assistance broadly defined. It's mandatory in covered jurisdictions, and there's no excuse for not complying because it costs too much. So that's the bad news. What's the good news? Well, the good news is something called targeting. Targeting, if you go back, if I flip back on those 6 or 7 slides, you'll see that there's nothing in the statute or the regulations. Those regulations in particular are about targeting, but DOJ has recognized it in a separate regulation, and it's actually something that was included as part of the legislative history. What Congress found was, because cost issues came up when the language assistance provisions were originally enacted in 1975, and the response to it was very simple. You only have to provide the language assistance in the areas and to the voters who need assistance. If you've got a portion of your county or your jurisdiction, even though they're technically covered, but you don't have any limited English proficient voters in that area, you don't have to provide assistance to people who don't need it. And again, DOJ's regulations make clear you can do this. The guiding principle is whether or not it's effective so that all the voters who need assistance are getting the assistance. And then you also see the notice letter. The reason why I included this is because one of the arguments during reauthorization was they actually cited to Briny Breezes, Florida, and they were saying 99% of the people of the community of Briny Breezes speak English. Why do we have to do it? Because we happen to live in a covered county. The answer is you don't. You know, it may be that you have to have some alternative mechanisms available to notify voters or have a call-in number, but you don't necessarily have to have bilingual poll workers in polling places where everyone speaks English. So the cost studies, 3 studies I'm going to go through very quickly. 2 GAO, one that I helped co-coordinate for purposes of the reauthorization. The first one was in 1986. All the studies basically found the same thing, very, very similar findings. You see, of the responding jurisdictions, they identified that for those reporting costs, the costs comprised about 7.6% of total election expenses, but you'll see that a large number of jurisdictions actually reported no costs at all. The 97 GAO study, if you actually look at this study, its significant limitation was that there were only 28 jurisdictions that reported complete cost data out of all the, out of nearly 300 covered jurisdictions that responded. So it wasn't really an in-depth study, but it still found that of those places that were reporting cost data, it wasn't a significant expense. And you can see Los Angeles County, which at that time and continues to have the most covered languages, language assistance was about 3.6% of their total costs. So the study that I co-directed with Dr. Rudy Espino of Arizona State, we surveyed all the covered jurisdictions. And you see 411 jurisdictions in 31 states. We had a very high response rate of about 60%. what we found is that a slight majority of jurisdictions reported no added cost for oral language assistance. A slight majority reported no added cost for written language assistance. And you can see that the 39.5% is for jurisdictions reporting that they didn't have costs for both. Among those jurisdictions that did report costs, the costs were actually pretty low. Oral language assistance averaged 1.5% of total election expenses. Written translations averaged about 3%. And you can see telephonic assistance. Most jurisdictions did not report having telephonic assistance available. Where they did, they reported costs of about 0.6%. What we're talking about for telephonic assistance is pre-election and post-election, or even on election day. If someone calls in and they want to speak to someone who speaks Spanish that can give them assistance, that person's available to them. The interesting bullet point at the end, and this is for Indra, is that the responding jurisdictions that were most likely to report the lowest costs were Alaska Native and American Indians. Part of the reason we found out, we did not find out at the time, but we found out later, is because Alaska actually wasn't complying with Section 203, so they didn't have any costs. If you're not doing anything to comply, the costs aren't that great. That's why I do want to certainly let Indra know that we fully appreciate the fact that she's got a lot of transportation costs to actually do what she needs to do, and the costs with the translation panels. These are just, I love these, the scatter plots. For anyone else who's a wonk, you'll love these probably as much as I do. So I've got 4 of them up there. It basically shows the red line is the average. You can see the dots that are above the red line are the outliers. You have a few instances, like you've got one instance in which a jurisdiction with about 10,000 people reported 100% of their costs were attributed to language assistance. But what we found is that only about 10% of the jurisdictions responding were outliers. 90% were below the line. And again, the same thing. This is basically the same slide, but it's based on LEP percent in the jurisdiction. This is for oral assistance. And then the slides for written assistance. And you can see, again, what you would expect to see, the line creeps up a little bit as you have a larger total population. And the line also creeps up a little bit more as you have an increase in the LEP percent, and then it drops off. But again, what we found overall was for oral language assistance costs about 1.5%, and then the written language assistance was about 3%. So the data trends noted in these 3 studies, the 3 studies were pretty consistent in the costs. Most jurisdictions reported they were able to minimize costs by targeting, which I'll talk about in a moment. The less populated jurisdictions were the ones that had the higher costs. And it makes sense, because if you have a 2-person office and you have to hire a bilingual coordinator, you've just increased your personnel costs potentially by as much as 50%. And then the biggest problem is that many jurisdictions simply don't disaggregate their data. They don't track what percentage of their election costs actually go to language assistance. So what are the costs of noncompliance? Because we need to talk about a few of those. Obviously, you're preventing people from exercising their fundamental right to vote. Most election administrators actually do care about that, contrary to what we lawyers sometimes like to think they really do care. Litigation costs, and the examples, again, I'm not intentionally picking on Alaska, but I am. But those are just the costs that were in terms of attorney's fees and costs from litigating 2 cases there. And certainly what Indra could tell you is that there are considerable costs now, but they're much less than what they were in terms of what the attorney's fees and costs were. Bad press is another one. Oftentimes election administrators actually do care what their public and constituents have to say. And then, of course, your remedial costs can end up being substantially higher. Startup costs, I mean, it's not always fair to say that you're a newly covered jurisdiction, it's not going to cost you anything to do this. No, it's like just about anything else. If you start a production line, your production costs are going to tend to be the greatest at the start, but as you go over time, you find greater efficiencies, and you find that you don't have to reinvent the wheel on certain things, and your costs will go down over time. And again, you'll see some of the reasons why that's the case. So tips on reducing costs. Let's talk about targeting. Now, targeting, the first thing is you have to find out, where do we need to target? Where is our population? And I just want to go through several ways that you can do this very quickly. One is you can use census data. Census data has several significant limitations. The most important one is that you heard from one of the previous panels, 203 data does not go down below the county level or in 6 or 7 states below the township level. So what that means is that you can't get precinct by precinct language data. It's just simply not available for census. But what you can get is oftentimes you can get the racial and ethnic data that can actually be down at the census block level that can allow you to actually see where the populations are, and you can extrapolate from that where it's likely that you're going to need to get your language assistance targeted. The other thing, obviously, with census data is that it does become stale. ACS makes that a little less true, but again, remember, ACS oftentimes is not available at the lowest level, so it's sometimes not as helpful as the regular head count from the decennial census. You can use voter registration lists, but most places don't track race or ethnicity by voter registration. It's certainly not language ability. You can ask your precinct officials. They can be a very good source of information, but we've also found that in some places, precinct officials tend to underestimate what the language needs are, oftentimes because language assistance may not be provided at the level that it needs to be, so they're not seeing the number of voters come in that need language assistance. You can also obviously identify where your voting age LAP citizens are. And part of that is you can also, you want to ask your local community organizations. You want to ask the ALDEFs, the AJCs, the MALDEFs, Mi Familia Vota, Alaska Federation of Natives. You want to ask the community leaders out there, where are the people who need assistance? And then you can just simply ask. Schools are oftentimes a very good source because they have bilingual education. These folks tend to know where, where you have linguistically isolated households. So step 2, once you find out the area, you need to identify the voters within that area who need language assistance. One way to do that is you want to ask the voters, as you already heard, you ask the voter what's the preference when they register to vote. If they're already registered to vote, you send them a postcard. You reach out to them, and that's especially true for newly covered jurisdictions because you're already going to have a large pool of registered voters. You want to send out postcards in all of the covered languages so they can actually read the postcard and then get an opportunity to either call you back or send something back in return to select what their language preference is. And then you can ask them what their language preference is when they vote. And then the third part is you actually get the materials and assistance to the places that you need it. What that means is that you can target the mailings. You can reduce your costs by targeting the mailings to only those voters who actually need assistance. So all those voters who return the postcards or self-identified that they wanted assistance, those are the people that you send the language materials to. You don't send them to the English voters. And then the bilingual poll workers, you only provide the bilingual poll workers in the polling places where there's actually a need for assistance. That doesn't mean you don't do anything in the other polling places, but what you should do is at least have a number available so that if someone happens to come in, if that's the one voter in that precinct that is limited English proficient and they come in, they can call that number and they can get assistance by telephone. And again, trained poll workers, it's a good way to get double bang for your buck. If you're going to have to recruit poll workers anyways, why not recruit people who speak both languages that are covered, both English and the covered language? You can train them, may have to pay them a little bit more because they may have to go to somewhat longer training. You may want to pay them a little bit more just as an incentive to get really good translators in there. And then, of course, you also should probably try to have standby poll workers who are available to deploy because people will call in sick. People do not show up. That's one of the things that a lot of people don't take into consideration is that election administrators are only as strong as the weakest link, and the weakest link is typically the poll worker in the precinct. Bilingual government election officials. A lot of places, especially in larger, more metropolitan areas, already have a large number of people who are employed by the city government, the county government, the state government who speak the language. Give them the day off. Let them be part of your bilingual poll workers. Get out to the polls. Help you out. I'm not going to spend any time on this because this is all the thunder that you already covered, but I will just want to reiterate that student volunteers are a very underlooked and underutilized resource that you absolutely should take up Dr. Z's well-given advice on that and use them. Language recordings, you can use them, but you got to be realistic. Would you want to listen to a language recording that's basically like stereo instructions for 15 minutes telling you how to fill out a form? If the answer is no, then it's probably not going to be an effective way to do it. You can use voting machines. In some cases, they've got language audio capabilities, and that's just something you need to take into consideration what's going to be the best fit for your community. use community translation panels. Oftentimes you can get volunteers to do this. They don't even necessarily have to be the ones translating. Maybe they're the ones, the group of people that you're giving the translations to get their feedback to make sure they understand it. Then again, you heard the second bullet point may not be true in a lot of jurisdictions because ballots tend to be very long, but there are actually some reports where jurisdictions can simply print on the opposite side of the ballot the other language. And then the other key thing is when you do all of this, conduct your post-election assessments to find out what's working, what's not. What did you spend a lot of money on that didn't really get anything, any increased voter turnout or participation? What were places you could redirect those funds to in the future? And again, that just gives you kind of a laundry list of people that you would want to talk to. And probably the most important bullet point is the very last one. Assessing cost and providing language assistance needs to be a very fluid process that varies from election to election. It cannot be static. If it's static, if you stand still, the world's going to pass you by, and you're not going to have an effective program. And whatever you're doing, you're probably going to be spending a lot more money on something that doesn't work. So that is all I have, and we will go to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And I got to tell you, I love the end of a presentation that finishes with good, tangible advice on both ways to save costs but also provide good service. So I appreciate that. Next up is, he's here. You're fast. Andrew Kang from Advancing Chicago.
Yep.
And I'll save this for the end, but I'm curious, a lifelong Chicagoan, correct?
Yes.
So favorite pizza place is, if you call it pizza, but you don't have to get there now. I call it pizza. Others disagree. So anyway, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us. I know you were here with us last year, and I look forward to your presentation. And then at the end, if you could drop that wisdom on us at the end, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
That's a very tough question. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate everyone bearing with my million questions during the course of the day. I actually primarily came here to learn, and that was my goal today, so mission accomplished. So if you learn anything from my speech, my part or not, it's not really my concern. So, but I have a good excuse for why I don't have a PowerPoint. Advancing Just Chicago, we were fortunate enough last week to get automatic voter registration passed in our Illinois General Assembly with bipartisan vote with 0 opposition votes from any legislator in the General Assembly. In the interest of saving money, we do believe this is something that will save our state considerable money in the long run so that all of you election officials can have more money to spend on other priorities like language assistance. And so hopefully if your state has not followed suit, you will do so in the near future. Our organization in Chicago, we've been poll watching since Section 203 came online for Cook County, first being with the Chinese community, and then later, more recently in 2011 for Asian Indian. We also have Korean voluntary language assistance in the form of bilingual judges, as well as translated sample ballot that is being offered by Cook County on a voluntary basis, something that they were very gracious in agreeing to do. We started with poll watching around 60 precincts, and we've expanded it as high as last year in November, poll watching over 125 precincts. Now, it's not 1,300 precincts like my California counterparts, but that's only because we don't have 1,300 Asian 203 covered precincts. Otherwise, we'd be burying you guys. I just want to make that very, very clear. And based on those 8 elections over the course of my time at Advancing Just Chicago, made a series of observations, and we normally don't think of this in terms of cost savings. I know that's something that's a high priority for election officials, but these are still nonetheless, I find it interesting that my biggest pet peeves, the things that really break your heart when you see in the polling place or when you're engaging your election officials, tend to be the biggest wastes of money as well. And so I think I'm coming in from a little bit different direction, but here are my top 3, and then a couple of thoughts about how we tackle that. Number one is bad translations. I know we all talk about this, but for those that are new 203 language groups, maybe you're a jurisdiction that hasn't had any experience with the community. We've heard a lot of folks talk about those challenges. Getting bad translations, it's not just a waste of money as far as paying a vendor for not getting value in return. It's incredibly frustrating for the community groups that you're trying to build trust and, you know, hit the ground running and really get momentum going into your election cycle. I think I can't reiterate enough that if the AAC or other of your colleagues that have experience with different language groups, if they have vendors that they've used and they can vouch for them, please go with that. The last thing we want to see is really bad translations on election day, or catch it way too late, and next thing you have is voters that are very confused and frustrated by the process. Number two is not displaying the materials. You spend all this time with these great designs. You put a lot of thought into how you're going to cover the printing costs and everything, and they get to the polling place, and your poll workers, either because they maybe they missed that 5 minutes on 203 and the translated materials, or they forgot because it's a long training. We all know that. They forget to put those materials on display, right? I myself, poll watching, even last November, walking into polling places, very engaged, very well-meaning poll workers, and you say, "Oh, can you show me your Hindi translated materials?" And they're like, "I don't think we have those." And say, "No, it would have been in a folder. It would have, said something that had a label on it." And we asked if we can go look with them, and we'll, lo and behold, find it in a locker, right? And it's not out of any malice. It's not out of any, not having belief in that limited English voters shouldn't be given an opportunity to have equal access. It's just not having that awareness, right? And so I would argue that all that work, if it's not translated on the poll worker level, it is a waste of money, and something that we should all make a priority to avoid. The last thing I'll say is the voters themselves not knowing about their language options. And this goes a little bit beyond just the outreach that I know many of you do, but I think it also extends into the polling place itself. Oftentimes, as we push in Chicagoland, as we push further out into suburban Cook, where the edge of the immigrant community is, we have poll workers who are less familiar with the immigrant community, and there are certain built-in assumptions about what voters do or don't know about the voting process, right? And they may not be aware that that voter comes in, and they may not know to ask for a translated ballot, right? There may be some social stigma for them culturally, feeling like they're going to have to be treated special or different by having to ask for the non-conforming, non-English ballot, right? And so to the degree that we can make them aware of their language options without making it a big deal, I think is something that we should all commit to trying to figure out together. So the three things that are very simple, and we've heard this over and over the course of the day, but I thought are worth ending the day with and hammering home. One is outreach coordinator. So I have the good fortune of having one of our outreach coordinators here from Chicago Board of Elections, Shobana, who set up that beautiful room for many of you. I will tell you, having a coordinator, but having the right coordinator, one that takes ownership and feels personally responsible for each and every election judge that they recruit, that checks in with them after the election cycle to see how their experience went, to hopefully retain them, right? So that retention and getting judges to show up on election day, especially for first-time judges, is a real challenge. That's essential. And so I really cannot reiterate how important getting the right person for that job is. And then the second is, and Jonathan mentioned this earlier, the advisory committee. It's not just getting a few grass tops leaders that are well known in the community. It has to be the people that are working in the community, right? Not just well known, but are also either at a service organization, have an organization that makes a lot of contact with on the grassroots level. This is essential, right? If you're not getting to those groups, you're probably limiting your effectiveness. And then finally, I'll say the bilingual poll workers themselves, getting them to buy in. I think young people, it's been mentioned a number of times. I know we all have sometimes biases against millennials, and are they going to be on their phone all day? But my experience, what I've observed in the polling place is a lot of young people take a lot of pride in being able to help the older generations, new recent arrivals, they get a real big kick out of it. They have the energy level to go all day, I think that the technology piece cannot be understated. Their comfort level with the process, even helping longtime judges navigate some of the new technology that they're being faced with, it's essential. And so those are the three things I think cannot be underestimated. Now, as far as maximizing return on the benefit, this is a sensitive subject, I think, for advocates. I'd say it's worth it even if one voter uses it. That may sound radical to you election officials, and I know they're like, oh, please no. But if one voter, 100 voters, 1,000, even 10,000, and the reason I would say so is it's a statement about what kind of democracy we want to be, right? We can't control the quality of the candidates that run in any election cycle, which we know impacts turnout, right? We can't control how much political campaigns invest in reaching the limited English or communities of color. We know that sometimes that they're severely deficient in that area. But we can control making sure that that opportunity is there. And I would argue that living in a democracy that wants all eligible voters to participate, and that we are sending a clear message for everybody, including fluent native-born Americans. When they come into the polling place, they can see and reflect on the fact that we live in a democracy that doesn't discriminate whether you're disabled, whether you're literate or not, whether you speak English fluently, whether you're born here like me, been here 60 years like my father, or we're sworn in today, right? That doesn't matter. And so, to me, that's what makes our country great, and why I'm proud to stand with all of you in this project. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andy, for both the constructive advice and the power and emotion behind what you had to say. I think it does a great job encapsulating why we're all sitting here trying to serve even just that one voter, right? And I think actually election officials will tell you it's worth just that one voter, at least most of the ones I know. So with that, typical of me, we're right on time. That's standard for me. Not at all. So we'll take questions. I have a series of questions as well, but I would love for the audience to interact and engage the panel. I think we heard some really good constructive advice, and so the floor is yours for questions, and then I can ask some questions. Madam Secretary.
I didn't mean to jump the line. So a couple of you mentioned, and Craig, I know you said you have multilingual ballots in your county, and as I mentioned in New Mexico, we have multilingual ballots. For those who have worked with jurisdictions that only print ballots in one language at a time, my question is, especially when you are having a situation where perhaps you're only serving one voter, do we have issues around privacy of the ballot, and how do you deal with those, or how have you seen them dealt with?
Yeah, we have just historically printed both English and Spanish so that there's no, I didn't understand, or they gave me the wrong ballot or something like that. We've talked to other jurisdictions, really trying to come up with a feasible way that you could cover all your bases. But with the new voters coming on, it's not on our statewide voter registration application for a language preference. It would be a constant game of catch-up, I think, trying to figure out which one we were supposed to print for them.
Next question? In the middle here.
So apart from opportunities like this where you get to share information among advocates and election officials among each other, what avenues are available for you to share this information with other election officials? Because we sometimes as advocates run into election officials, and when we're talking about increasing language assistance, for example, the response is, oh, we have Google Translate and that's enough. It'd be great to say, oh, you should talk to X, or or just know of other opportunities where we can invite them to become more educated about how they can do a better job.
Yeah, and again, I mean, if we make all the elections officials successful, we all look great, and that's our theory on it. We try and constantly pass the information around. You know, one of the things I talk about, if you've got the same election vendor for your tabulation equipment, you've got all the information right there to be able to build your ballot. You know, we're using the same information that we've been using for years, unless there's a statute change for the headers, the instructions, and different things like that. I know I was very proud of it. Panelists County, right next to us, they just came under the 203 and they came over. We immediately helped them. And the supervisor went before a board of county commissioners and unequivocally told the county that we had just saved them over $5,000 by giving them everything that we had so that they didn't have to go out and do it again. So, you know, to me, that's great. It's a good incentive that we're able to help these other counties around us. You know, we deal with a lot. We have a great, I think, great contacts in our Hispanic community in Hillsborough County and Tampa, and we're constantly interacting with them, be it a job fair, whatever it is. We also utilize our county. We have civic leave with our county, so we're able to reach out to get Hispanic or Spanish speakers to be able to work on election day. So, you know, any ideas like that we can come up with. And I actually shared with one of the commissioners before when Commissioner Masterson was talking about starting this database, is I can tell you right now the top 3 that I use: the Hispanic Bar Association, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and churches.
So just as a quick follow-up, and I'm sorry, I'm Marcia Johnson-Blanco with Lawyers Committee. Until the EAC builds their database, can we just send them to you?
Send them to Commissioner Masterson. He can forward them on.
In all seriousness, and it's a fantastic question. I mean, our role is to serve as a clearinghouse, right? It's pretty clear in HAVA. And so to the extent that before we build a database or whatever, Sean's got to get to work on that, and I'm surprised it's not done yet. But before we can have that, the answer is absolutely yes, share that information with us. To the extent that we can facilitate the sharing of those contacts, that information, that's exactly what we're here to do and will do. And to the point that both Craig and Dr. Z made, election officials are the least proprietary people I know. They have no proprietary protections around their ideas, around their relationships. They want to share it with all of their colleagues. And so that's frankly what helps build our clearinghouse, because we'll take anything and everything and share it across the country to try to help give that information. So the answer is yes, share it with us. The election officials certainly should share it with us, and we'll make sure it gets out to the other election officials to do just that.
I'm a strong believer in R&D, and that doesn't mean research and development. It means rob and duplicate.
The only thing I would add to that is that a very good source that is available right now is go to DOJ's website. They have the consent decrees that are already in place. One of the good starting points oftentimes can be to try to find a jurisdiction that's similar to you, that covers similar languages, and see what a DOJ require. For example, one of the things that's very common in DOJ's consent decrees is they will target the number of bilingual poll workers who are supposed to be in a polling place based upon the number of people who may be LEP in that or have a Spanish surname. And you'll see how they do that, so that if you have more Spanish speakers, for example, you need to have more bilingual poll workers. But the other thing to keep in mind is that even once we end up having an awesome clearinghouse, whatever, you know, hopefully it's through the EAC, the other challenge with 203 is that there's no one size fits all. So you have to take the best practices that other people have done, look at your own jurisdiction and see what's going to work best for you. I wish it were one size fits all. It would be a much easier statute to implement, but there are a number of reasons why that's not the case, not the least of which is laws vary from state to state, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and the language needs of the voters you're trying to service also vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
I think also what's key is that you also reach out to your neighbors. With Montgomery County, because we're so close to the White House and off the red line, when Fairfax County got their consent decree, we actually spent 2 days with them. And also we do a lot of work with COG, Council of Governments, and in Maryland specifically, I've done a lot of cultural awareness, cultural competence, language competence to our other local jurisdictions, because keep in mind, everyone, it's not 1940. Back in the days, in the 1800s, you were born on a farm, you lived on a farm, you died on the farm. People are moving around. So if I could empower a resident of Montgomery County and they move to Howard County or Prince George's County or Frederick County or even Florida, somewhere in Florida, the overall kind of picture is we follow the same almost election laws. There's different norms of how we deliver the things and different expectations. But if you could encompass and give a kind of a broad brush and you give that individual the information they need, they could pass that to another individual. And I'm a true believer about teaching someone how to fish as opposed to giving them the fish. So it's very important that we all share this information in different formats. And like I said, I'm available, so don't call me on Sunday evening, but Monday to Friday, I'm here for you. And like you said, it's for you, because at the end of the day, I may serve as a voter from New Mexico moving into Montgomery County or vice versa.
Time for one more, if anyone's got one.
Marissa Leadling, and I just have a quick suggestion that I've run by a few election officials, including folks here. So increasingly, we are seeing election officials doing a really great job going out of their way to either provide, say on state websites, translating the online voter registration or providing extra translated registration forms, things like that. But this is in places where not every county necessarily is covered under Section 203, or not every precinct will be targeted for translated materials. So if there could be just a very simple phrase, a few sentences that at least explain people's Section 208 right to assistance, I think that that's like a helpful public education thing that could easily be incorporated wherever there is those extra translated materials. And that simple phrase could be something that could be translated and included in the EAC glossary, which I know is quite handy.
Got it. Love simple suggestions. Awesome. Well, do me the favor of thanking our last panel today. Thank you so much all for sharing. I'd invite Adam Ambrosi up now. We'll close out the session. The good part is he's going to have to speak extemporaneously about his thoughts to close out the next steps and thoughts moving forward, and then I'll just fill in the gaps, right? That's how that's supposed to work.
Many gaps. Thank you all for both coming from far away, some from close by, and staying the entire day. I mean, last year we had a great turnout out in College Park when we had this event. And the only downside by the end of the day is that we noticed bit by bit throughout the afternoon, folks were leaving, and it was sort of staff and participants by the end. And I really do think that both the content provided here, the uniqueness and the specificity that we've had, I think really has kept the day moving with both ideas, shared commitments to making progress here. And I've just been, again, really impressed and blown away by both the knowledge of the folks from the advocacy community, from the election officials and professionals, the staff at the EAC, and especially Sean Green, who led a lot of the excellent work from the EAC's perspective. From Democracy Fund Voices staff, Stacy Scholl led the effort from our team. And where is Stacy? Stand up, wave. Wherever. Stacy's in the back there, did amazing work for us. Natalie Adona, who worked with Chicago and Fairfax to help set up and run the model polling place signage conversation. Freddie Salas, who's our program assistant, who's been doing amazing work on helping set up and run this effort. And Isabel Blank, our intern, who started 3 days ago and dove in and came out from DC for several days to really get a deep dive into elections work. I really, my first experience with this issue was actually about 12 years ago, when I actually was a staffer at the Election Assistance Commission, much younger at the time, and we brought together for a half-day session with Terry Alminis and a variety of other experts to have what we called the Asian Language Working Group. And it was an initial effort to try to look at, the NVRA registration form and translations, the questions around how you take the unique terminology related to voting technology and help translate it into the variety of languages that are required. And it was the start and the germ of an idea that I think we really have expanded over the years to both the event that we had last year, the event that we've had this year, and I think a growing commitment that both the Election Assistance Commission has, as well as Democracy Fund Voice has, to try to build a bridge and maintain and bolster the bridge between the language advocacy community, the election officials that really care about this, and then the public. I mean, we are all obviously the high achievers in the room as far as language access and reaching out to voters. I think the real question is, where do we go from here? And aside from teasing the EAC for all the things that it needs to do yesterday, you know, I really think that it's incumbent on all of us in the room to both think about some of the new ideas that we heard today, think about how we can both rob and duplicate, R&D, I think was the term that Mr. Latimer used, from other jurisdictions, other advocates to engage with. I mean, you know, if there was a way to encourage each of our election offices to have a Dr. Z in their own election offices to do that type of volunteer-based mass outreach to communities across a jurisdiction, I mean, that is really how election officials think about serving their voters. The work that Julie Wise does in King County, that Madam Secretary does in New Mexico, how do we figure out a way to both praise that work, for advocates to lead with these election officials and engage in the communities in new and innovative ways? And so I really again have been energized by today. I'm so thankful for everyone coming out here. And I do think that I actually don't want it to be a year until we all hear from you all again. I think we need to have some conversations, both one-on-ones and maybe on the dreaded conference calls, to try to figure out what can and should be built, researched, or promoted between now and hopefully the third annual Language Access Convening. And so thanks again to EAC, to all the staff here, and to you all for coming and staying the whole day. I really very much appreciate it. And please stay in touch with us as well as the commissioners and their staff. Matt, what else do you have to say to close us out here?
What else could I say? Thank you, Adam, and I'll echo just very briefly the thanks to the EAC staff, headed up by Sean Green, our communications folks, Henry and the technical folks back in the back, making sure that the stream was running all day long, and Antoine, and it was a team effort. Stacy and the Democracy Fund Voice folks, I can't thank you enough. This was another successful effort. I'm very proud of what we did, but in the end, the devil's going to be in the details. The devil's going to be in the follow-up on how EAC can work with the election officials that we partner with on a daily basis to take some of the ideas and concepts shared here today and make them reality. And I was reflecting at lunchtime, talking to somebody, today's D-Day, right? The anniversary of D-Day. And you think about the courage and the bravery of those folks on D-Day and storming that beach, and you know, the patriotism that it took, and I think to what little steps, what little voyages we can take to fulfill what their mission was that day, right? To live up to their courage and bravery that day. And so I've got a note of about 50 things for us to do, each little things that will build to a greater effort to provide that access. I can tell you that this is a commitment from the EAC. This has been since Commissioner McCormick hatched the idea with you, Adam, back before the last language summit. This is something that the entire agency is committed to working on. And so now, whether it's just simple checklists, you know, I've got you down, Julie, to provide us how you do it. Craig, counting on you. Cameron, counting on you, and the rest of the election officials to give us some checklists to share with your colleagues, to bigger ideas, to how technology can be leveraged to doing this. I know, Cameron, I'm going to call you out, but Cameron asked, you know, moving forward, is there a role for virtual reality in tackling some of these challenges? I don't know the answer, but it'd be sure cool to try it. Augmented reality. Well, I live in augmented reality already. But, you know, it's kind of neat to explore and look at those bigger challenges and try to tackle the big questions while using the blocking and tackling the simpler steps to just provide better access. So I want to thank you all for your patience today. The good news for you all is it's now rush hour. So should be easy to get home. But I'm very appreciative of the passion, the commitment, and the willingness to sit here today. And so in the end, I want to thank you all for your time and commitment to this effort and mission. And so with that, we'll close it out. I've got a baseball practice to go coach. 6-year-olds throwing balls at me. And so let's get out of here and go enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.